G'day guys, Justin from Battleforged Gaming, and welcome to another How to Paint Ultimate Guide. This episode is going to be how to paint a Dark Angel. To begin, we build the model in sub-assemblies with the body, arms, head and backpack all separate. This is going to allow us to access all those hard to reach places. From a Chaos Black primer, we're going to use our small Citadel dry brush to apply 2 or 3 coats of Caliban green to get a nice, smooth, even coverage. With your Caliban green dry, the next step we're going to move on to is to base coat all of the colours. The first colour we're going to start with is Abaddon black. We're going to pick out all of the under-armoured areas, like in between the legs and the arms, and this will take 2 coats of black to cover. The brush we will use for this step, as well as all of the remaining steps, will be our extra small Artificer layer brush from Citadel. After your 2 coats of Abaddon black have dried, the next colour we're going to base coat will be Mournfang brown. This is going to be for the holster of your bolt pistol, as well as any other leather pouches or belts on your model. With the Mournfang brown dry, the next step is to base coat the ropes as well as the grip of the sword with Screamer Pink. You will need to apply 2 coats of Screamer Pink to get a nice even coverage, and if you make any mistakes, just go back with your previous colours and tidy up. The next colour we are going to base coat is Xandri Dust. We're going to use this for the little skull on the shoulder pad, as well as the Aquila on the chest. This will take 2 coats of Xandri Dust to cover. And again, if you make any mistakes, just use your previous colours to tidy up. We are going to use Mephiston Red and paint in the tilting shield as well as the little book on his hip. I did change my mind throughout this tutorial, so you will see me paint the entire tilting shield red, not just the sword. Dark Angels use red gun casings on their weapons, so you can use this recipe to paint in your bolt pistols as well as your bolt rifles. Next, we are going to use XV88 to paint the areas that we are going to want to be gold. So this will be the little icon on the backpack as well as the hilt on the sword. You only need to use 1 coat of XV88 for this, as it is just a placeholder for our gold. Like the XV88, we are now going to do the same for the silver areas. But for this, we're going to use standard Mechanicus Grey. Again, you only need to do 1 coat for this, and this will be for all the areas that we want to be silver. The final colour we're going to base coat with is Rakarth Flesh. This is going to be used for any purity seals or parchments, and it will take 2 coats of Rakarth to cover nicely. With your base coats blocked in, the next step is to move on to the lenses of the helmet. I like to do this step next, as an edge highlight can actually tidy up the area of the lenses. We're going to start with 2 coats of corn red first. After the corn red has dried, you want to wash the area with Nuln Oil. After the Nuln Oil has dried, we're going to take corn red again and try and just paint the inside of the lens, leaving a darker outline on the outside. Next, using some Evil Sun's Scarlet, we're going to try and paint a small area towards the inside of the eye, leaving some darker corn red on the outer edge. Similar to the previous step, we're going to take some Fire Dragon Bright and try and paint a small area on the inside of the lens, as well as a very thin line underneath the bottom of the eye. The final step for the lenses is to take some white scar and apply it in the top corners of each lens to give a reflective effect. Next, we move on to the recess shade. For this, we're going to mix 1 part of Abaddon Black to 1 part of Caliban Green. And then we're going to work all around the model, applying this into all the recesses of the power armour. Tidy up with some Caliban Green if you make any mistakes. With your recess shade dry, we're going to move on to highlighting the black areas. The first colour we're going to use is a 50-50 mix of Abaddon Black and Eshin Grey, and you're just going to apply that to the high points of the Under Armour. Next, we are going to take some Eshin Grey and apply it in the same area as before. This is just going to help transition to our next highlight. Next, using Dawnstone Grey, we're going to highlight the highest points of the Under Armour. So we want some of the previous Eshin Grey still showing. Finally, to finish off the grey, we're going to use some Administratum Grey to add some dots. I like to pick an imaginary line down the under armour and just paint a series of dots on the highest points. With the black under armour areas finished, we're going to move on to the edge highlights of the power armour. This is a 3-step edge highlight process, so if you want to cut it down to a 2-step, then this will be the step you cut out. For those that do want to paint this step, we're using a mixture of Warpstone Glow and Caliban Green 1:1. If you make any mistakes, just use some Caliban Green and tidy up. With the primary edge highlight finished, next we are going to move on to the secondary edge highlight. For this, we are going to use straight Warpstone Glow. If you wanted to skip the previous step, this will be your primary edge highlight. We're going to move around the whole model and apply the Warpstone Glow, and the aim is to leave some of the previous edge highlight visible. If you make any mistakes, use your previous colour to tidy up. The next colour we're going to use to edge highlight is Moot Green. Like the step before, we want to leave some of the previous colour visible. If you make any mistakes, use some Warpstone Glow to tidy up. To finish off the power armour, we are going to mix 1 part Moot Green with the 1 part Flash Gitz Yellow and apply a dot edge highlight to the edges of the power armour. This was the part of the tutorial where I changed my mind and wanted the whole tilting shield to be red, so we'll quickly apply 2 coats of Mephiston red to the whole tilting shield. After our Mephiston red has dried, we are going to apply a recess shade. This is going to be a mixture of 1 part Rhinox hide to 1 part Mephiston red, and we're going to apply it as neatly as possible on the recesses of the tilting shield as well as the little book on the hip. If you have any weapon casings, this will be the recess shade that you also use. The first edge highlight we are going to use on our red is Evil Sun Scarlet. This is going to be a 2-step process, so you want this edge highlight to be quite thick. The second edge highlight for the red is going to be Fire Dragon Bright. Like the previous Power Armour edge highlights, you want to leave some of the previous colour visible. And if you make any mistakes, you can just go back with some Evil Sun Scarlet. The dot highlight colour we're going to use is a mixture of Fire Dragon Bright and Flash Gitz Yellow, and we're just going to apply this to the very corners of the tilting shield. Sometimes you may have some rivets that get painted with your edge highlight. Simply take your recess shade from the previous mix and redefine them by giving them a recess shade again. With the red areas finished, next we are going to move on to some white areas. For this, we're going to base coat with grey cere. I do change my mind yet again later in this tutorial, so you will see the sword change from white to black. You simply want to apply 2 coats of this grey cere on all the areas you want to be white. We are also going to use grey cere to mark out a line on our tilting shield. To do this, paint some lines as thin as possible in case you need to fix them up, and then block in the line with your grey cere. With your pattern blocked in, this is how your tilting shield would look. Next, take some white scar and apply an edge highlight to the edges of the tilting shield, as well as the small sword on the helmet. This is where I change my mind yet again and decide to make the sword on the tilting shield black. For this, I simply use the same recipe as the one we use for the Under Armour. The tilting shield complete, we're going to move on to the bone areas. For this, we are going to thin down some Mournfang Brown with some Lahmian glaze. This is going to be 1 part Mournfang Brown to about 5 parts Lahmian. And you just want to wash the whole area of the Xandri dust, and this will also include the little skull on the shoulder pad. With your wash dry, the next step is to take some Ujabti bone and apply it to the highest points of the Aquila. We want to leave the recesses dark, as this will add depth to those areas. The final step for the bone is to take Wraith Bone and apply it as an edge highlight to the same areas you did previously, leaving some of the Ujabti bone visible. The bone complete, Next, we are going to focus on the leathers. For this step, we are going to apply Nuln Oil over all the areas we painted with Mournfang Brown. This is the new Nuln Oil, so it does dry a little bit glossy, but we will be applying a varnish at the end. As you can see, the Nuln Oil has dried a touch glossy, but that's okay. The next step, we take Mournfang Brown again and we apply a nice thick edge highlight to the high points of the leathers. To finish off the leathers, we use Death Claw Brown as a broken edge highlight. This is a technique I like to use to add some weathering to areas. It is similar to a full edge highlight, except we use a series of dots and lines to give it a weathered appearance. You may also want to add some micro scratching to the areas of the leather. This is how your leather will look when it is complete. Next, we will focus our attention on the pink of the rope as well as the sword grip. For this, we are going to take Nuln Oil as well and apply it over the whole area that was painted Screamer Pink. With your Nuln Oil dry, next take Screamer Pink and apply it to the high points of your rope as well as the sword grip. Adding Pink Horror to your Screamer Pink mix to make a 1-to-1, we are going to highlight those same points, leaving some of the previous Screamer Pink visible. Adding a small amount of Ujabti bone to your previous mix of Pink Horror and Screamer Pink, we are simply going to add a dot edge highlight to the highest points of the rope as well as the grip. With the rope and grip finished, we will move on to the wax of the Purity Seal. For this, we are going to base coat that whole area with our Screamer Pink and Pink Horror mix. This will take 2 coats. Next, we wash the whole wax with some Druchii Violet. To finish the wax off, use your mixture of Pink Horror, Screamer Pink and Ujabti bone to add some dots to the highest points of the wax. With the wax complete, we will now move on to the Purity Seals. For this, you want to mix together some Pallid Witch Flesh and Rakarth Flesh 1-to-1, and we are going to apply this with a series of horizontal brush strokes. This will give our Purity Seals a parchment type appearance. The same technique as the previous step, we're going to use pure pallid witch flesh and apply some horizontal brushstrokes, this time focusing on the higher points of the purity seal. The final highlight used for the purity seals is a mixture of white scar and pallid witch flesh 1:1. Again, use some horizontal brush strokes and pick out the highest points of the purity seals. This includes the edges of the purity seals themselves. Next, we are going to add some depth to the purity seals. For this, we're going to use some Agrax Earthshade and apply it down the recess of the two parchments, as well as a small amount thinned down at the top of the purity seal to add some aging to it. To add scripture to your purity seals, mix Rhinox hide and Abaddon black and paint a series of lines and dots to represent script. With the scripture painted in, this is how your purity seal will look. I also did the same for the purity seal on the little book as well. Before we apply any transfers, we need to first paint in the company markings on the knee pad. For this, I have chosen the 5th company, which means I need to paint my knee pad in 2 quarters. You simply want to thin down some Xandri dust and try and paint a cross on your knee pad. And then I will be painting in the upper left and bottom right areas of the knee pad so that we can get a nice cream base coat. The bottom left section of the knee pad will be painted with Abaddon black. The 2 areas that we based with Xandri dust, we will now cover with some Ujabti bone. This will take 2 coats to get a nice solid bone colour. The black quartered area, we are going to use the previous edge highlight we used on the Under Armour, so that will be the 3 grey step highlights. Finally, to edge highlight the Ujabti bone quarters, we are going to use Wraithbone. This will only be a single edge highlight. After your company markings are finished, we will move on to applying transfers. I will work my way around the model and apply some transfers so you will see which ones go where, and we will let these sit for a bit before applying some microsol. When applying a transfer on an area that would be overlapped with an object, I like to do a test fit and then remove the transfer and cut it down with a hobby knife or a sharp scalpel. You may need help from your parents if you are doing a step such as this. Finally, after the transfers have sat for a bit, I like to apply some microsol. This will help remove the clear edge to the transfers as well as help them contour to the shoulder pads. Once you have done this step, you will want to apply your squad number to the other shoulder pad and then repeat the process with some more microsol. If you do not have microsol, you can use a mixture of white vinegar and water. With the transfers applied, this is how your model will look. I now varnish my models with Tamiya TS80 flat clear and then move on to the metallics. First, we are going to base coat all the areas that were standard Mechanicus with lead belcher. The areas that we had base coated XV88 earlier, we are going to now base coat with Retributor Armour. With your Retributor Armour dry, we now apply an all-over wash of Nuln Oil to the lead belcher areas. With the Nuln Oil wash dry, we then take some Reikland Flesh Tone and apply that to all of the Retributor Armour areas. With the Reikland Flesh Tone dry, we then re-layer with some Retributor Armour, picking out the high points of the sword hilt, as well as the little icon on your backpack. Adding Stormhost Silver to your Retributor Armour, make a mixture of 1:1 and paint the higher points of the sword as well as the icon on the backpack, leaving some of the previous colour visible. Finally, to finish off both the gold and the silver, we will apply a single edge highlight of Stormhost Silver. With that step complete, we have finished painting our model. Next, we need to carefully scrape back the contact points and use a small amount of plastic glue to bond the model together. After you have glued your model together and based it up to match the rest of your army, you have completed our How to Paint Dark Angels Ultimate Guide. Hopefully you have found this tutorial helpful. If you have, please drop us a like. And if you want to stay up to date with our other tutorials, give us a sub and take it easy, guys.